And now, a page from the diary of Flo.
Dear Diary, there's something about protecting people's homes through Progressive that inspires me, because I just had an idea for a book. Well, it was originally an idea for a movie based on a play inspired by a podcast. But the idea is how you can save when you bundle home and auto. Might not be the best idea for a book.
Save an average of 17% on car insurance when you bundle home and auto through Progressive.
Maybe a radio commercial? Guess we'll never know.
Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Discounts not available in all states or situations.
Welcome to the Full Court Press Podcast. Insights and observations from around the National Basketball Association. We aim to provide an intellectual and analytical perspective to what is happening on the court. Here's your host, Glenn Willis.
Okay, we're back for playoff update. We're going to talk about the competitive series, but don't be offended if your team is down 2-1 and we're not covering that series. Especially Wizards fans, don't be offended that we think they have no shot. They're actually playing right now, so there's no point in really talking about that. I still would expect the Raptors to win that series. They've been a better team start to finish on the season.
Well, they're your NBA champ prediction.
They are. So I might be a little bit vested on my. I try not to cheer for my predictions. I really try hard not to do that. But I think even when you're like try to be really intentional while not rooting for your predictions, you still find yourself doing that now and then.
My biggest one, I agree. Try not to do that. But my whole thing for like the past, kind of the whole second half of the season was I just didn't believe in Portland. And so it's kind of, from a Wolves perspective, that's what I wanted the matchup to be. I wanted the Wolves to get the six.
We talked about that.
And it's the Blazers are losing the first two games, and I'm like pumping my fists behind my laptop. But yeah, it's at the end of the day, what are our predictions? It doesn't really matter if they come true or not. We're just you make the prediction in the moment.
It's more about the analysis that you attach to your prediction, so that hopefully I think that's what's more enjoyable than just. And Greg and I don't even do a ton of predictions, but we just thought it makes some sense but provide some analysis there. And of course, I'm not mad that I said that. I think Toronto gets to the finals and wins, but if they encounter Cleveland, they're going to lose. And they need someone to take Cleveland out. So I'm not mad the Pacers are up 2-1.
Oladipo.
Yeah, we're going to talk about that series. Even though they play a little bit later tonight, we'll talk about the first 3 games of that series. No Greg today. He's away playing Good Samaritan on a cause. So he made the right choice and is helping someone out in need. And Dane Moore.
You're left with me. Bad Samaritan Dane Moore.
No. Excellent stand-in. Our listeners know Dane helped us with that 3-hour, 15-minute playoff preview. It was our first 3-person pod ever, and we're not prepared to be efficient. It was very Russell Westbrook-like recording that day. But Dane Moore, zone coverage, and Wolves Wired. We're going to talk a little bit about the game that he attended per his media credentials last night in Target Center, where the Wolves got a massive win. And I'm curious, but we're going to save that to the end. And also want to, since we're not going to go deep on that series, you're recording later tonight?
Yes, we will. I'm sure we'll very much talk about the vibe of Target Center. I mean, just Minneapolis. I think I've taken away a lot of the fan in me. I don't know if that's a sad thing or not, but I definitely felt it at Target Center last night, and it was from the cheesy intro videos at the beginning. You're kind of getting chills that Minnesota's back in the playoffs, and it's been forever. And
how old were you the last time they were in?
14 years old.
Okay, yeah.
So literally half my life. Yes, they have not been in the playoffs, but yeah, it was. Target Center was a blast, but we'll talk about that later.
Yeah, we were watching that last night, and every time Houston would make a little mini run, you're like, here it goes. But they held up, and Derrick Rose was really helpful. And
twice now.
Yeah, and it's interesting that you really worry about him on the defensive end, but him playing instead of Jamal Crawford, he's just bigger, and he's harder to. I mean, he doesn't move great. But he was solid in his decision-making last night. He obviously understands what Tibbs wants schematically. And sometimes, he's just a lot bigger dude than Jamal Crawford. And sometimes just size and occupying space is a thing, so.
Absolutely. I think refer to defense too much in absolutes. You're a bad defender, you're a good defender, kind of like we do. You're a good shooter, you're a bad shooter.
Yeah,
but we know
sort of like I talk with when I work over with Chris. I always say I hate the exercise of good pile, bad pile. Like
Yes.
there's a spectrum, and then there's also such a thing as team defense as
Yes.
well. And we're going to talk about the Milwaukee Boston series here in a bit, but I was noticing even like Malcolm Brogdon is not the most impressive athlete, but the Bucks play better on both ends of the court when he's in the game, and so it's not always about athleticism. But we're kind of all over the place. We're going to talk about Philadelphia and Miami. Sixers go up 3-1 in a game 4 that the Heat should absolutely have won. I'll go through a few notes here and then to get your reaction and let you weigh in. So my observations are this: Miami can't compete in games where they have allowed Philadelphia to put up like 120 points or more. They just don't have the offensive firepower to match that. So they need to control the pace and be the more physical teams. In game 4, they were able to have a little bit more control of the pace than they were in game 3. But as I said, Miami should have won game 4. They held the Sixers to 106 points. They were very physical, but they were only 13 of 25 at the free throw line. In my view, that is completely unacceptable at this level of basketball in this context in the playoffs. At home, trying to tie the series back up 2-2, make it a 3-game series. They were the worst free throw shooting team in the league last season. This was the 16-17 season. And it's surprising. I recall from when Greg and I did their offseason episode, they didn't have a single rotation player last year shoot even 80% from the free throw line. And I was like, that has to be super weird. So I had to go look today. They were 22nd this season. And they had 4 rotation players shoot better than 80%, but that bugaboo got them in game 4. They left 12 points at the free throw line and lost by 3. A big turning point in this game or this series has obviously been the return of Joel Embiid is the biggest factor. One aspect of that is Kelly Olynyk can't play at the 5 when Embiid's in the game. He absolutely cannot defend him. He matches up better with Saric at times when I guess what I notice is when Saric and Ilyasova are playing together, pretty interchangeable, but Saric is doing more of like the center type of stuff, and he's a good playmaker when he's at the 5. Whiteside played a little better in game 4, but he blew his assignment on 2 possessions at the end of the game. The one that allowed the Sixers to go up 3 with 58 seconds left. James Johnson was defending Simmons, as he has been for most of the series, with Redick and Embiid in that pseudo horns alignment. Redick turns and screens Johnson and Ellington looked like they were trying to execute a switch, but Simmons is just too quick for a switch to be something that keeps him from getting to the rim. He goes straight to the rim. Whiteside had plenty of time to get to the rim and at least put Simmons on the free throw line, where he's a 56% shooter, but he was just a spectator, just watched Simmons go dunk the basketball. Then the Heat get the bucket from Dwayne Wade to get back within 1. Next Sixers possession, Redick and Embiid operating in the DHO on the right side of the offensive floor. Embiid just erases Josh Richardson with a illegal but a very firm screen. And Whiteside is just standing there watching. He doesn't do anything to help Richardson avoid the screen. If he gets into Embiid, if he recognizes what's going on and gets into Embiid's body at all, he can help Richardson navigate that screen. Didn't do it. Richardson gets crushed by Embiid. Redick dribbles to the baseline, and Whiteside just standing there watching him put up a wide open 18-footer to put the game back up 3. I don't know why he's still playing.
For me, with Philadelphia, and this is something I noticed months ago, watching them at Target Center, was the frequency of their substitutions. I mean, they'll get guys out of the game 2 or 3 minutes, 3 minutes in, even if they're playing well. It's just this constant shuffle that I think Brett Brown works wonders with in the sense that it always seems like the guys who have the least minutes played were the least effective. And when you have a coaching style where you have almost set rotations for all 4 quarters, you can have more of an opportunity for a player that's having an off night to more adversely affect your team. And with Philadelphia, yeah, I mean, their 5 starters are going to get their minutes, but the way that they effectively shift in their bench, I think allows them to put out a team that doesn't feel like they're playing backups. As weird as that, if you blur out the numbers on the jersey in a way, and obviously a lot of that is Bellinelli stepping in seamlessly for Redick or Ilyasova for Saric. But I've just always been so impressed with them, and I think that has come out in this series, and making the decision between McConnell and Fultz, I think is an interesting, hypothetical. But thus far, Brett Brown has towed that line effectively in a way that their core players that really make the difference, notably Embiid, Simmons, and I would say Redick also, are just always insulated by a group of players that fill in the gaps effectively. And I think that's going to be the difference in this series.
Yeah, and there's two different philosophies. Chris and I talked about this on one of our crossover episodes a few weeks ago, but do you want players on your bench that have similar skill sets to your starters, or do you want guys who have complementary skill sets? And with the Sixers, it doesn't matter if Bellinelli's in there or Redick's in there. It doesn't matter if Sharch is in there or Ilyasova is in there. A big difference from Simmons, but when you have a guy that former number 1 overall draft pick already maybe knocking on the door, being one of the 10 best players in the league, and he hasn't even learned how to shoot yet, you're going to have a drop off there. And same with Embiid. But 2 through 4 on that roster, very interchangeable. Almost doesn't matter who's in. It probably matters more on defensive possessions at the end of the game, just to get you guys there a little bit quicker. But for me, when I watched Game 4, it looked to me like Brett Brown felt like they had to have this game to win this series. And I think, I'm guessing at what he's feeling is if they go 2-0 with their 2 games they had Embiid, they're going to feel a sense of we're better than them. And then when your team knows they're better than the other team, there is no excuse for letting that other team outplay you. And the thing that he did that was kind of piggybacking on your quick substitutions, it had to be so frustrating for Kelly Olynyk, because what Brett Brown would do. So they were trailing by about 10 points in the third quarter, and you could see the urgency in Brett Brown, and he is coaching the heck out of his team. So what he did, he put Embiid on the bench, and then Spo would put Olynyk in, and then the next time the ball stopped, Embiid would go back in. And you already have an issue with Whiteside in terms of engagement and execution and focus. And so he was putting in either Bam or Whiteside. When Embiid would come back in, he would take Embiid off and put Embiid back on. And suppose do I go with Bam? Bam fouls on 2 consecutive possessions, and he looks like a rookie, which he is. And then what you end up with is Whiteside blowing 2 defensive possessions late that were really, really huge. And the other thing that Brett Brown did was, once he caught Whiteside on Embiid, he would not play through Embiid. He would force Whiteside to be an off-the-ball defender because Whiteside is the most effective defending Embiid when Embiid has the ball in the post, because he's just a huge dude. He's quick, he's long, and he's one of the toughest guys for anyone to deal with, including a guy as talented as Embiid. But that Horns action, he got caught up in the wash of all the screens, and then the DHO, Whiteside had zero recognition that the DHO was coming. And it's like Brett Brown was just toying with Spo. And Spo's a great coach, but he has a couple of tools in Ben Simmons and Joel Embiid that Spo doesn't have the luxury of having.
Well, he has better tools, and it seems that he has more tools, which is saying something, given the fact that Miami has some pretty good depth and a lot of different options. But yeah, that was the thing, is they constantly were shifting the rotations that they put out there. That I don't know if it made Miami uncomfortable, but it never let them get comfortable. And yeah, Kelly Olynyk, I'm looking at it now, didn't even play 9 minutes in the game. Bam played 16. And those are 2 pretty crucial players to them off the bench. So kind of what I was saying before is the Sixers find this way to have their least effective players be the ones who play the least. And for Miami, some of their effective players, because I think Olynyk is a big part of their offense, is in being able to take him out of the rotation. It's not that same balance. You're playing a player like Ellington maybe more than you want to, or maybe Wade too, if he ends up being a not good Wade. I don't know. That seems to be a coin toss here and there.
In preview, I had said that Spo should decide basically after his first rotation if he's going to play him again or not,
which is never going to happen. But yeah, I mean, not that you're wrong. I just think. Okay, so here's my question to you: What if this Heat team never gets Dwayne Wade? Has he helped more than he has hurt them after what we've seen and after really kind of winning Game 2? Do you think Dwayne Wade has been more helpful than hurtful to this team?
He's been both. He's been helpful and hurtful. He's not always an efficient scorer at this state. When he is an efficient scorer, his confidence in the moment, I think, is good. But when Dwayne Wade's not on the court, they prefer to play kind of inside out offense. And when they have Olynyk and James Johnson as playmakers at the big positions, they're really good at it. They're not very good at it when Whiteside's on the court, which is why Brett Brown was basically toying with which center the Heat had in the game. But when the game slows down and it goes possession, the Sixers have a lot of comfort with letting the read dictate where the shot comes from. And if the Heat's offense kind of gets bogged down and they lose their rhythm, Dwayne Wade's not a bad guy just to throw the ball to and say, go to work, because he's done it so many times. He's so comfortable doing it. And he got that big shot to pull them back within one. And had they had a better defensive possession apart from spectator Whiteside, they might have had a chance to go back down and win the game. And if they win that game and split at home, they turn it to a 3-game series, and it really opens it back up. But it feels like the Sixers have all the leverage on this, and unless Spo does something really, really bold, like does he just start Wade and ride Wade in Game 5? Does he sit Whiteside the whole game, and does he find a way to get Olynyk on the court, but find a different way to defend Embiid? I don't really see it, but I'm not an NBA head coach, and I don't have 8 assistant coaches that will work 20 hours a day to try to unearth something, but it will be interesting. So when we, Greg and I were talking in the week, it was like, okay, Game 1, Sixers got all of the 3-point looks they wanted out of that lift DHO action and the pin down screens at both kind of elbows, if you will. Game 2, Miami came out, was super physical and kind of dictated the physicality of the game, and it really worked when Embiid was not available that game. Game 3, Brett Brown had to bring the adjustment, and he got some help, not having to bring the ball up every single time, but still kind of getting opportunities where he was initiating the offense. And Game 4 was like as much a wrestling match as it was a basketball game. And so I don't know that there's another level of physicality for the series to get to. If it is, I mean, they had 3 double technicals in that Game 4. It's all like Game 3 and 4 are kind of a mashup in my head now of a bunch of near fights and all of that. But the Heat don't back down, so it'll be interesting to see what comes of Game 5.
The Sixers didn't back down either, though. That's what surprised me. And you got James Johnson in there, who seems to be fighting just to fight, kind of. And I wouldn't want to fight James Johnson, but
I'm not fighting James Johnson.
But Ben Simmons wasn't afraid to get in there with it. Dario wasn't afraid to get into it. And you got to kind of think about those players' ages.
Right.
And that's a grown man, James Johnson, who I actually think is a professional boxer. That
he's a black belt in, I think, 2 different mixed martial arts sports. And all of his siblings are, his parents are. Unless I don't know where I'm hearing all of this, but unless that's just like the fish getting bigger every time the story's told. Not a guy you want to mess with. And you'll recall earlier in the season, he and Ibaka had a encounter that got both of them suspended a game, and Ibaka was pretty quick to remember that I don't think this is the guy I want to get a fight with. But it is amazing to see Simmons, the way Simmons is handling himself, and the way that Embiid is handling himself, the way that Sharp is handling himself.
They look like adults.
Yeah, they look like grown men, and they have still a lot of growing that's possible, which is scary. So I think of that in this context, which is maybe a really weird thing to do. Maybe this will.
I love weird. Let's get weird.
I imagine that Danny Ainge, has kicked the can down the road, and everybody's been impressed. And I think he did a great job getting Tatum. Not that I think Markelle Fultz is done being, I think he's still going to be at least a good player. But I think he handled that well. He's handled trades well. But now you look at what the Sixers have, it's like, whoops, did I push our envelope into a spot where there's actually a team that's lined up to be more dominant than us? And I was never for or against the process. I always just thought this is an experiment that will be interesting to see how it plays out. And it'll be interesting to see how, the commissioner and league management kind of deal with the intentional losing, if you will. But I still think that those that were always on trust the process, there's a certain amount of randomness at every outcome.
Absolutely.
Right. And And but I do wonder if Danny Ainge is like, oh no. oh no.
I was, well, first of all, just touching on the process, I was just like in for every element of like the dark comedy of the process. Like what was 3 years ago that was? I think the Sixers, when they won 10 games, it was fascinating for me to watch just the dysfunction of it all, but while also believing kind of in the big picture of it and how hard they played in those games. I'm embarrassed to admit how many of those games I did watch back then, but it is, I mean, the Brett Brown factor has carried over from those dark days to this team, and just a belief that they have in their coach seems to be present in this team, in this series. And that's because I think Brett Brown believed in them years ago. And I know it's not necessarily many of the same players, but there's kind of a sentiment to that.
Yeah, there's a DNA to it that carries over from roster to roster. You know, there's a culture to it, and even like in this series, when down 10 points, game 3, and it feels like kind of the series is really, up for grabs at this point, and then you realize like this probably doesn't feel hard to them. That 10-win season was hard. It had to be hard, and again, like to your point, a lot of those players aren't on this roster anymore. But the guys that have emerged through that have this, you can tell, have this toughness about them. And already, sometimes Brett Brown has really come through this, looking great, but you still see that the team has the personality of Ben Simmons, and I just love watching him just go at it. And he's just like, can't stop me, sorry, not sorry, but you can't stop me. And it's amazing because Goran Dragic is a huge point guard, but he doesn't ever even get asked to defend him. So it's pretty amazing. But
Ben Simmons reminds me of, I'll let you, we'll move on. But what I think about with Ben Simmons is, back in the day playing basketball myself, is when there would be the kid who is like 3 or 4 years younger, but he gets to play up with the big kids like myself. And he might be scrawny, he might be small, he might be whatever, but he's just has this skill and belief in his skill that is like, I don't care if I'm 14 and you're 18, I'm just going to beat you. I don't care if I'm 12 and you're 16, I'm just going to beat you. And Ben Simmons has that mentality, and also the physicality that just is that. It's unstoppable.
He's like a 6'10" Isaiah Thomas.
Yeah,
he has the mentality, but he has his body, and that's why I think when I look at like what's going on in Boston, and still all of they still have a lot of trajectory, a lot of upside. I think Horford's help bring a wonderful culture to that locker room and to that roster. I think that all young players will be better for having played along with him. He's so selfless. He's so team minded. And we'll get to Boston in a minute, but every time I watch Philly, I imagine when Danny Ainge watching the game and just going like, did I screw this up?
Well, I don't want to butcher this, but at Sloan, Sam Hinkie was talking about the Celtics going out and making the move for Kyrie Irving. And it was at the time of Sloan, the Celtics they might have even been the 1 seed at the time, or were right up there with Toronto, and Kyrie's clicking. But Hinkie said, was this the time for them to make their move to go get Kyrie? Was Kyrie the one to get, or is there an argument to be made that they should have put it off even farther before making their major move to go get whatever player X? And we can sit here now and say, well, it seems like they still have enough assets and flexibility that if Kawhi Leonard or Anthony Davis, whatever, become available at some way down the line, that they can get them. But maybe the move for Kyrie Irving was too soon. And so that's kind of counter to what you're saying with the process, which is, but those two teams are in very different types of processes. Yes, they both had a lot of assets, but the Sixers process was about turning young assets into contributors. Boston's process, and I know this sounds silly when they have Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum, but it seems like their trump card in it is that we have these assets that we are going to use to go out and get someone who is already an established superstar, and they both might work. It's not binary. It could be.
Some would say they did that when they got Kyrie. It just depends. I mean, everybody has there's people have opinions about Kyrie that are all over the place, and but I saw it as when they got Kyrie, I was like, well, look what Brad Stevens did with Isaiah in 2 years. In only 2 years, now you get a guy who is a more legitimate size. He's, I think, 4 years younger. And I always thought year 2 Kyrie would be really when they really kind of hit their potential. And as a fan, I hope they're right there with the Sixers for the next 10 years, but the Sixers might have, having Embiid and Simmons and having the just the nightmare lineups to try to match up with. It just might be on another level. I mean, I hope it's like tooth and nail the whole way, and I even hope Toronto is relevant for the next 2 years or so as well. But thinking about the next 10 years, Boston versus Philly, what I'm seeing right now is like, and I forget. Then Gordon Hayward's not playing, Kyrie Irving's not playing, Marcus Smart. Maybe they're the best individual. Well, he's almost sure their best perimeter defender, right? Not playing. But it'll be interesting to see. But the Philadelphia Miami, even at 3-1, is just it's been the one I have to be in front of the TV. I can't stand to watch live basketball, but I cannot not turn the game on when these two teams are playing. So, any last thoughts on Heat Sixers?
The Sixers, the last thought I'll leave you with is they only have $67 million committed in salaries next season, and all they lose is JJ Redick and Amir Johnson. Yeah,
and they can bring JJ Redick back without using any cap space. And they can pay him up to 120% of what his salary is this year, which should be
definitely get him.
Nobody else is going to offer him that. It would appear.
I don't think anybody would.
When there were detractors earlier in the season, when Denver signed that extension with Gary Harris, I had said that's good they did that because I thought the Sixers would love to bring in a guy like the age of Gary Harris to be on the timeline. Now Redick has done so much as a veteran for that team this year, and I've been so excited for him because he looked so frustrated last year with the Clippers, and he gets fired up. He has a lot of edge to him, but you can tell he's enjoying this, and it just makes me personally happy for him because things were so just heavy. In terms
what a
of
risk that was too for him to take.
Right,
he's 32 years old. I mean, talk about trusting in the process. I mean, this is one of his last real years to compete, for a championship.
Yeah, and the thing that the optics of him are so different because it used to look like he wasn't a good enough third or fourth guy, depending on how you were counting with the Clippers and who was available at any given time. He wasn't suspended for smacking a team personnel or whatever. But now he looks like a guy that really unlocked. Now Simmons is playing this year, obviously, but he's really just unlocked a lot of what they needed. And I thought they're not going to take this postseason super seriously. It's their first one. But when I think that what Redick did was show that front office that, no, if we get more shooting, if we get more shooters like Redick, we're going to be tough to be dealt with. And I don't know how they were able to avoid making a trade for Bellinelli and or so we got a buyout. But once they added shooting, it was like, oh no. And then I continue to be just impressed with, no one ever talks about him just because Embiid and Simmons get all the love, but Sharp is so freaking good.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, we're going to talk about Utah OKC, another really fun series. Doesn't have quite the edge yet. I think it's heading there. That
Miami's, it's getting there.
Yeah, it's heading there. Because Russ and those Thunder, they don't back down. Whether they're playing, smart basketball or not, they don't back down. And it's interesting to talk about Game 3 here. But take a quick break, then we'll come back and talk Utah OKC.
If you were in the military, no matter where you served or where life takes you, Navy Federal Credit Union is proud to serve you. As a member, you'll receive a lifetime of membership benefits for you and to share with your family, including a full suite of financial products designed to fit your needs, access to over 300 branches, and thousands of fee-free ATMs. 24/7 live support through our US-based call center, and more. You can even access your accounts, transfer money, pay bills, and deposit checks with the Navy Federal mobile app. Navy Federal is proud to serve over 7 million members, including over 1 million veterans and their families. So if you're a part of the Armed Forces or DoD, or if you're a veteran or family member, Navy Federal is ready to serve you. Just visit NavyFederal.org for more information. Call 1-888-842-6328 or download the Navy Federal Credit Union app. Message and data rates may apply. Navy Federal Credit Union, federally insured by NCUA.
Okay, we're back. Utah took the lead on Saturday night 2-1 in this series. I don't think anyone's shocked that that's where this is. OKC won game 1, 116-108. Basically, their strategy in that game was to basically not let Joe Ingles ever touch the basketball.
Which was interesting.
Very interesting.
I didn't expect that.
Yeah. And then I had made a note between game 1 and 2 that Utah needs to make OKC feel like Paul George has to defend Donovan Mitchell, because that would open up a lot of other stuff. Utah won game 2, 102-95. Just a very inefficient offensive game for OKC there. Credit to Utah. When Rudy Gobert is not hurt, they are basically the best defensive team in the league. And then on Saturday, Utah 115, OKC 102. And OKC scored quite a bit in garbage time at the end. So for my note here is Quinn Snyder made a really nice adjustment after game 2. They were not able to generate good looks at the 3-point line. They were 11 for 28 in game 1, and you'll take that almost any game. They won with their defense in game 2, but Coach Snyder knew they were going to have to generate more offense to win the series, and they put up 115 in game 3. So obviously he unlocked something. And what I noticed when I went back and kind of mentally charted the game, I didn't and made notes, was that they went away from their high screen and roll and moved to side pick and rolls, and then they got the OKC defenders really spread out and far from each other. In the way that OKC was defending that opened up a lot of open 3-point shots above the 3-point break, because both defenders were squashed into both corners at the end of the day. Or if someone rotated up to that shooter at the top of the key, then they would get a corner 3. They were 4 for 5 on corner 3s, but they're able to get the OKC defenders on the strong side of the weak side really far apart from each other. As a result, 34 3-point attempts in game 3. 10 of their 13 makes came above the 3-point break. So my note must have been that they only made 3 of their 4 or 5 corner 3s, but not super important. And I thought Billy Donovan made a major mistake in this game. His starting lineup, Dane, Melo -20, Brewer.
That was my note too.
Brewer -20, Russ -25, Paul George -13, and Steven Adams -2. And so I actually had to go back and watch when Adams went to the bench, when he came back on the court. It didn't pop out to me when I was watching the game the first time, but I had to go back once I saw those numbers and see what was going on. And basically what happened is in the first quarter, the Utah went on a 12-2 run, which eventually became a 14-2 run. But after the 12-2 run, OKC takes a timeout. They come back with Patterson at the 5. The Jazz.
Why though? Why? What happened in the 12-2 run? So full disclosure, I was in the media room, and so it's on the TV, but you don't got the sound. I was watching, but not watching. What made them go away from Adams in those runs? Like, what does he not do?
It felt like Donovan didn't like what he was seeing on offense, that they weren't generating good looks, and it's one of those things where you make a decision, whether it's right or wrong, whether it's, and usually decisions aren't 100% right or wrong or what have you. But what happens, so 12-2 run, OKC is basically dysfunctional on offense at the point of the game. Billy Donovan calls time out. They come back with Patrick Patterson at the 5, and he hits his first 2 3-point attempts.
Oh, okay.
And unlocks their offense. So their offense, so in by the end of the first quarter, they were leading 30-22 after that 12-2 run. And so the offense was clicking, but then you have to make a decision. Well, am I just going to ride this, or do we need to get back to our defensive kind of foundation, which is Steven Adams? So Patterson hits those consecutive 3-point shots, gets offense going. OKC leading by 8 in the first quarter. Adams played 2 minutes in the second quarter, and OKC was +2 during that stretch. Patterson played 6.5 minutes in the second quarter, and OKC was minus 14 and a quarter. And half of a quarter, they were minus 14. And then the Jazz win the second quarter 36-23, the third quarter 31-22, and the fourth quarter 27-26 for OKC. But like I said, a lot of that offense came very late in garbage time. So Patterson helped them unlock their offense, and they stayed with what I wrote was defensively challenged lineups for most of the rest of the game.
I want to spin back to something, and that being Joe Ingles versus Ricky Rubio, that decision. And I think on paper and in theory, that makes sense. Who's the more, because Joe Ingles isn't just a shooter, he's a playmaker. But I can't remember any Jazz game that I've ever watched even for a quarter where a team has tried to take him away as much as Oklahoma City did. Because it wasn't just George. It was, they were begging Ricky Rubio.
Oh, yeah.
Not just to shoot, but to
Russ was just ignoring him. Russ is freelancing while Rubio is standing in the corner. And Russ is dynamic in the open court. So, yeah, it's not completely dumb just to let Russ freelance if you feel like there's a player on the court that allows you to freelance. But Rubio's been making his shots for quite a while now. It's not just this series. It is his first playoff exposure. I recall listening to your Wolves Wired episode where you guys were talking about how strange it was to see Ricky Rubio at the podium, right. And it must be strange even to watch him from a distance now, having success in a playoff environment. But yeah, they force him to knock down shots, and he's knocked down shots, and you wonder if OKC just goes, okay, let's see if he can do this, 4 times to get Utah to 4 wins, or not, or whether they switch it up. Donovan Mitchell's he's been super, super impressive. I can't imagine how good he's going to be like 2 years from now. And I'm exhausted of the whole, and I don't really participate in the whole Ben Simmons versus Donovan Mitchell debate. We talked about it on our player preview, and we did it was supposed to be a brief awards segment, but it was so content rich that it'd be longer. But in most seasons, Donovan Mitchell's season would be easy rookie of the year. God, look back at Michael Carter Williams, and I know people love or hate Brogdon. Yeah. But to me, it doesn't matter. It maybe only matters to Donovan Mitchell because it probably would take his shoe deal to a whole. There's usually a incentive and a shoe deal. Like Ben Simmons, a lot of people believe he didn't play any last year, so he would be eligible for his sneaker deal incentive and stuff like that. But yeah, Rubio's been knocking down his shots. Quinn Snyder has slowly been able to get Ingles freed up to either knock down shots or make plays. And then I think that Billy Donovan has to go back to understanding that Steven Adams needs to be on the court to wear down Rudy because he's so much bigger and more physical than Rudy. Not that Rudy is not strong, but Adams is just enormous. And I think that Rudy was so effective the whole game because Steven Adams sat from the midpoint of the first quarter until there were 2 minutes left in the half and didn't really have to bang with anybody. And that allowed them to have their defensive anchor be pretty fresh and capable of holding up for the whole stretch. I think Adams has to be on the floor. And if it's not working offensively, let him crash the boards, he's an excellent screener, either in this pick and roll or in pin down or whatever, what have you and stuff. But I thought that when I went back and watched, I was like, oh, Patterson hit those 2 3-pointers that unlocked their offense, but then their defense it wasn't like there was like a series of horrible possessions, but it got like incrementally worse across the second and third quarter. And they were able to finally tighten it up a little bit in the fourth quarter where Adams played more than he did in the second and third. But they just weren't able to put enough points to get back in the game. But
I think, and you said the word you used with Russ was freelancing. And I think what that is Donovan just can't control him. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what he says to Russ. Russ just will bring what he thinks is best. I think that's a pretty fair supposition for us to draw about Russ. And particularly his freelancing on Rubio went too far. Yes, Ricky Rubio is not a good shooter. He's making making some now, not to go good pile, bad pile. But if there's a player who belongs in the bad pile when it comes to shooting, it's Ricky Rubio. But it wasn't just that he did that. He gave Rubio the opportunity to go to the bucket consistently. And Ricky is a playmaker when he is on the move and going to the basket.
That's the best part of his game, is creating shots for others with his dribble.
And with Adams out of the game, Rubio can even be, I don't want to say a threat because he's broadly not a strong finisher at the rim. But if you don't have Steven Adams out there, you're taking literally nothing away from Ricky Rubio.
Yeah, I'm recalling now that I didn't note it, but the first two offensive possessions after Adams went to the court. So I was fixated on the Patterson made threes, but first two possessions for Utah after Adams went to the bench, Gobert and Favors each got an uncontested shot at the rim.
Yep.
So they struggled with that. They have no rim protection when Patterson's at the 5. Jeremy Grant can sort of be a help defender at the rim, but he's not going to like really stop it. He's not big enough to really stop someone from getting to the rim. But then the other thing you think about it, when I was watching Russ freelance off of Rubio and Rubio's in the corner, it seems like coaches across the league want almost any player that's open in the corner to take a shot. And I was watching game 4 of Boston Milwaukee. We're going to talk about that here in a minute, but Aaron Baines got a corner 3 and he took it and made it. And if Aaron Baines is allowed to take corner 3s, then you shouldn't really be leaving anyone open in the corner.
Absolutely. This is just on my mind because I've been doing a lot of research on Houston and isolations, and I just going through all the NBA's best isolation players. And so you have James Harden, who scores 1.22 points per possession. You have Chris Paul, who scores 1.1 points per possession in isolation. There's only 4 other players in the NBA who score a point per possession in isolation. So that means that all you need to do is shoot 33% from the corner to be as good as the very best players in the NBA in isolation. So yes, everyone should. I mean, pretty much anyone in the NBA can shoot 30% from the corner, right? And that's even 0.9 points per possession.
Yeah, it'd be a very short list of guys you think that, like an Andre Robertson, typically. I mean, he has to take that shot if he's on the court and open, but it's not like the coach is really happy to see that shot go up. But he'll have 2 or 3 week stretches where his shot's going down that it's not crazy, But yeah, we're almost to the point where all 5 players have to be accounted for in the corner, no matter what position they play, etc. I guess Robertson, Simmons. I mean, we could try to make the list, but it's probably not the best podcast content. But the point is you can't really ignore anybody in the corner anymore.
Yes.
So OKC is, I think, for sure going to deal with. Utah is going to deal with an OKC team going forward that is not going to back down. And I think if they play their best defensive lineups and trust their defensive philosophies, that OKC were able to get back in this. Now, Paul George was uber efficient in game 1. I don't know if he scored 36 or 38, but it only did it on, I think, 19 field goal attempts. And I went back and looked, Dane. I was like, how much of an outlier is that? And I noticed on the season, there were 6 games he scored 35 or more, and he never took more than 22 field goal attempts to do it. So it wasn't as much of an outlier performance.
Wow.
So that's pretty incredible that all 5 times he was 22 field goal attempts or less. All 5 times he scored 35, or all 6 times he scored 35 or more.
Can't you spin that as a negative too? A rip on Russ? That how has Paul George not had more?
How many more games would he have done that?
How has Paul George not had more games where he shot 20 plus, 25 plus field goals in a game? I mean, I think about one of the game that sticks out for me was that OKC Denver game. I think it was a TNT game. So I was watching that where Gary Harris hit that game winner in overtime. And
the crazy string that Denver has to win to stay alive.
Yes, exactly. Are we sure that Russell Westbrook is a better just offensive option to run your offense through than Paul George is? Paul George looks very healthy to me, and very right now he looks like a better player than he was in Indiana offensively. And I think that's what I had down is an adjustment in this series. Right now, honestly, where I'm at is I'm not really giving Oklahoma City much of a shot in this series. Maybe that's kind of counter, because I think it requires that higher usage from Paul George. And I don't know if Russ is going to be willing to give that up. If he doesn't.
Yeah, so I made the comment that Utah is going to deal with an OKC team that comes in ready to even the series, play hard, play physical, not always play smart. But you comment on Russ kind of doing whatever he wants. There were stretches this season where Russ was being differential. Russ was sharing the ball a little bit more. Now, in the postseason,
I have a comment on that. I'll let you finish.
In the postseason, he's always his trust factor kind of plummets when things aren't going well, and he tries to kind of put the team on his shoulders and do everything himself. I think that comes from a place of good intent, but is a very non-constructive approach to trying to kind of get grass back in the series. But I think Paul George at this point is so important on both ends of the court that I think he's going to be his strongest contributor when there's one other really good offensive creator. But unfortunately for him, Russ's efficiency, he wasn't very efficient last year, totally volume score, but he was incredible in the clutch and stuff. But his efficiency, I think, imagine like him in Boston this season or what have you, or have Cleveland had, you look at like the trade that Indiana got there, everybody killed in the beginning. I have to pat myself on the back, right? And I thought Indiana did okay when you're Paul George, but
you were the one,
I guess. But no, people are probably sick of hearing it. No, Victor Oladipo was in his second season, and Orlando Magic hired Scott Skiles to be their coach. Was the dumbest hiring decision when you were trying to work with a young roster. And I just thought that Victor Oladipo is going to be in the best environment he's ever been in, and we'll see if he's as good as I always thought he was, and sure enough, he is. We're going to get to that.
We'll get to that
in a little bit, but it's going to be interesting to see how the rest of the series go and how that impacts what Paul George is going to do in the summer. And it's going to be super interesting because LeBron's going to be a free agent. Yeah. So, and I think it's basically surfaced now that LeBron pretty upset that Paul George was gotten and he didn't land in Cleveland.
My comment pertains to Russell Westbrook, that, and I don't have the data to back this up, but it seems that when you said what you said was Russell has shown times where he is willing to be differential and get Mel going, let Paul George get going. My problem with Russ is what he does is he goes, I'm not shooting this quarter. I'm going to let them go do it for this whole second quarter or third quarter, whatever. It's baton passing doesn't work.
Yeah, he's either in one gear or the other.
Yeah, and
it's not a read and react thing. It's I'm in one gear or the other, right? I'm either in drive or in reverse, is one or the other.
And that's why I don't think this Oklahoma City experiment hasn't worked as well, because yes, they have probably three dynamic scorers if Melo is used appropriately. But it's either predictable or it's baton passing. It's not, when you think about dynamic offenses, let's think about Golden State. Let's think about Houston. Yes, there are heads of the snake, but it is a flow. It's inherently a flow, and you move through. And
the read dictates where the shot comes from.
Exactly. And that's
Russ
so rare.
Russ is, usually players are somewhat equal parts or near equal parts instinctive and intellectual. With Russ, he's like the most instinct. He plays to his instincts like so much more, and not reading the floor and not reading the play and not reading what the defense is showing and those sorts of things. So, maybe he's the superstar offensive version of Hassan Whiteside, and I just don't want to be that critical. But he's a very gifted player. There's no doubt about that. But he does seem very beholden to his instincts. And, I continue to enjoy Russ in some ways, but it is interesting, like, to think about how many more iterations of this exercise we're going to see before everyone decides, like, it's not going to work. It's not going to happen. They 2 years ago, they were right there, but they ended up baton passing in the end of the game and kind of punted their chance to win that game 7. So,
well, at some point, Russ is 29, and I know that means he's still in his prime,
and he's going to occupy a ton of cap space for the rest of his career.
If he's 29, that means he's 3 years away from being 32, which is Carmelo's age,
Chris Paul's age.
I think Chris Paul's been pretty good this year,
he has. But there's a sense of urgency to whether Chris Paul's ever going to get a championship or not.
Yes, and that's what I'm saying is that. At what point does that Yeah, how much more patience do we have with that mentality? And he seems so unwilling to change that really Utah is just like the perfect team to take him down, or like the existentially perfect team to take him down, because they are everything that Russell Westbrook isn't.
Yeah, and Utah is the characteristics of their team are a lot like what the Spurs have been for a long time, right? Where they're playing, quote, I hate this phrase, playing the right way, but the fundamentally sound at all times, team-minded at all times, work hard for each other at all times, and you find teams like that easy to root for. The thing I think that works most against OKC is because OKC can play at a high level. It is that there's such a lack of depth there that the longer this series goes, the more they're going to run out of gas. And I'm shocked that Corey Brewer's even being as effective on Mitchell as he is, but he's as savvy as they get. And I'll try to stop this back padding, but earlier in the season, I said Portland needs to get Corey Brewer. They just need a professional wing. They just need a professional wing that will play off the ball, work really hard on defense, play really smart basketball. And he ends up in OKC, and look at how bad Portland looked, and they are so bad at the wing in Portland, and it really cost them what looked like to some people that was shaping up to be a real step forward in their process. But now it's like, do we take the whole thing apart? You know, but I mean, I know OKC's thankful that you have Brewer because he's a professional guy. He's gonna work hard, be in the right spot, do team-minded things, but you know they really only have 6 rotation players for guys that should be in the rotation in a postseason, maybe 7, depends upon how you feel about Jeremy Grant. And
I was gonna say I like Grant.
I like him as a prospect. I don't think he's a guy that should be playing in a rotation deep into the playoffs at this point. It's sort of like how I feel about Rashawn Holmes. It's like I like him as a prospect, but he probably shouldn't be playing, in a postseason environment where you're really trying to do something special. But
he's 24. I mean, I feel like Grant's been around for a while. It's like I guess he's still a prospect.
He's developed his body. Yeah. I think he's a lot more vertical even than he was a couple of years ago. He's developed a bit of a shot. I just think where he's a guy that's like. I think it works when he's next to Adams on defense, but I think roster fit's going to be important for him to be able to kind of be an impact player on the teams. And that 80% of the league is that they need the right roster fit to be able to contribute to early successful basketball. So
he gets to the line too.
He does.
I like that about
and he just plays hard. He plays really hard. He gets up and down the floor.
Yeah.
I think his most elite skill is his speed that he can bring to that position. So if you're wanting to play fast, there are times that, if you fall down, 10, 12 points and you got 5 minutes left and you need to put a guy that can help you play fast at the 5, he's a nice option for that. But I just think that, if you look at the minutes distribution for OKC, if this gets to a 6th or 7th game, they're going to be way more fatigued. And I would think, and even maybe even a little bit more banged up just from exposure to, all the physical play. And especially if, like the Miami Philadelphia series, I expect this next game to be super, super physical. Mm-hmm. And when Quinn Snyder can play 9 players and Donovan can play 6.5 players, that takes its toll. And we're going to talk about Houston in Minnesota at the very end for just a few minutes, but I see something happening in Houston that presents some risk if the series goes deep at all. And I'm on the record already as having saying, I said in our play preview, Houston needs to get out of the first 2 rounds playing no more than 10, maybe 11 games, because they will run out of gas if they don't get off their feet. And, and these first 2 rounds. And so that loss, last night was, I think, pretty big to their kind of outlook. But
I got some thoughts on that too, but I'll hold
okay.
them.
So Boston, Milwaukee, midweek. I didn't think we'd be talking about this series.
Yeah, you messaged me. You're like, I might skip this one.
Yes. And that's why I recorded Friday's game. And just in case, thank God I did, because there was a lot of interesting stuff to go look at. So I'll watch game 4 today. And then I was like, I have to go watch game 3. But so things are tied up. And the reason I thought this would not become a competitive series with the Boston was simply outplaying Milwaukee the first game. They were playing harder. They were playing smarter. They were playing more as a team. They were making the reads. They were just a step ahead of Milwaukee this first 2 games, even though that crazy shot Chris Middleton hit at the end of regulation put that first game in overtime. Still, I thought they were soundly outplayed. Adjustments by Milwaukee after game 2. Malcolm Brogdon goes in the starting lineup. Tony Snell to the bench. I don't dislike Tony Snell, but for whatever reason, it seems like Brogdon is like the ultimate glue guy for this team. The Bucks came out playing a much more conservative defense than they had all season long. Less trapping, less gambling, switching almost everything, keeping everything in front of them, and really not allowing any dribble penetration. And then this is a roster that I'm not the first person to say this, but this should be a roster that can switch everything better than almost anyone in the league because there's so much length and athleticism and young, long athletic guys as well. There's very interchangeable players. There are kind of a positionless roster. Now in both games 3 and 4, the Celtics eventually figured it out on offense. Game 3, the first half, Celtics 35 points, second half 57. Game 4, 35 points in the first half again, 63 in the second half. And I had to go back and see if they kind of did it the same way in the second half of both games in terms of finding a way to beat that new conservative, keep it out, keep everyone in front of you defense. But it was very different. In game 3, they were just attacking very early in the shot clock and were attacking with dribble penetration, trying to attack with dribble penetration before the Bucks even had all 5 defenders back. So they were on fast, quick, and that worked. They got a lot more shots at the rim in the second half of game 3 by doing that. Game 4, the Bucks were getting back, had better transition defense, and they were getting back and they were alert that Boston would try to use that technique. But the adjustment from game 4 was that when the Bucks would switch an off-ball screen, so like Horford has the ball, for example, at the top of the key, Jaylen Brown sets a pin down for Tatum, the Bucks switch it. There's a quick read screen where the guy who set the first screen kind of comes back. And when you do that, you don't get it very long, but you get this nice little pocket. And the pass is right there. Who's as good as Horford at delivering the pass right where it needs to be, right on time and right on target. And that opened up their perimeter shooting in game 4. But it's interesting that they had to make an offensive adjustment at halftime. In both times, they almost got back there. And certainly in game 4, they were right there. I have an observation on the last possession, but I'll stop there. In the series of the game 3 and 4, anything you want to add?
The last possession will tie in well to what I was going to say. And also kind of a question for you. So we've all been raging against you got to stop trapping every pick and roll Milwaukee. Like this, come on, this isn't working. Then they switch to the switching type all ball screen actions. And you're left with inherently, that's the sacrifice of a switch, size disadvantages. And so, yeah, sure, it's fine. We switch a little guy on to Aaron Baines. He's not going to take advantage of us unless it's on the offensive boards. And they killed them on the offensive boards. I think it was 16-2. So Milwaukee had 2 offensive rebounds, one of which was that very last play of the game. But I think what I'm seeing out of Milwaukee is they went so far from one perspective on ball screen action to all the way in this other of full on switching. I don't know. Are their players unable to have something in the middle or to try a couple different things? Because the full on switching ball screens, I also didn't think was a good tactic because they got absolutely beat up on the boards. And it was like, go ahead, bomb it away, Jaylen Brown, because there's like a 30% chance we're going to get this offensive rebound because Milwaukee is, for all their length, is miniature and in weight. And they got bruised by the Celtics. I know Milwaukee won this game, but
they've been a terrible rebounding team all season long. The center position has been the thing that's been lacking. Whatever scheme you're running, they're not good enough and strong enough at the center position. The 16 is noteworthy. The 2 is noteworthy because notice I said their transition defense was better. One reason was they completely abandoned chasing offensive rebounds. Now, Giannis got that one at the very end because
you needed it.
Time and situation dictated that, you need to chase this. But what was interesting on the last possession, I told you before we recorded, I must have watched that last possession by the Celtics where they didn't get the tying shot or the go-ahead shot if it was 3, like 20 times to figure out what was originally drawn up here. It was fascinating. So Tatum was inbounding the ball opposite the side of the benches, which is always really interesting to me. Brad Stevens is one of the only coaches that inbounds from the other side. And I think the reason he does it is that when you inbound it right next on the side where the benches are, the other coach can yell 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 and try to get the 5-second count. Where if he's on the other side, then you don't have to compete with that. But it was interesting because originally Jabari Parker was defending Tatum as the inbound passer. Right before the official handed the ball to Tatum to inbound the ball, Giannis and Parker switched. And then after the ball was handed to Tatum, Horford set a screen for Jaylen Brown, who, as hot as he was, I thought they were going to drop a play for Jaylen Brown. It just so happened that they were clearing Brown to the near side corner to open up the backside. And so they were using Brown as kind of a decoy to open up the backside. And then Horford turned as the ball was being lobbed to Marcus Morris on the other side of basically the low post or the mid post on the other side of the court. Horford turned and set a pick for Rozier. And by what I saw, the intent was for Rozier to come free at the right 3 break because he's been hitting so many big shots for them late in the season and in the postseason and those sorts of things that I was okay. Brad play for Terry Rozier. He has some confidence in him as a 3-point shooter. We're on the road. We're going to go for the win. It's kind of like in football when the home team goes for 2 instead of overtime, right? But what happened was when Horford set the screen for Brown, Brogdon got switched on to Horford. And then when Horford turned and screened for Rozier, Brogdon is the smartest defender on Milwaukee. He sniffed out what the primary intent of the play was and just shut off that passing lane from Morris to Rozier. Right away knew exactly what was happening and did it. And he is so freaking smart as a defender that I bet when Brad Stevens saw Brogdon on Horford, he's like, oh no, Rozier's not going to come free. And it was, and when I went back and watched, it's like Giannis going from off the ball to the inbound passer. And then it just all lined up perfectly for Brogdon to be the guy that was getting switched onto Rozier and knew exactly how to cut the passing lane down. And then Marcus Morris basically was forced to, because at first I was like, he didn't draw that up from Morris. There's no way. And of course, and I was like, there's no way he drew this play from Morris. So I have to figure out what was the shot they were looking for. And after I finally saw Rozier come off and Brogdon just jump immediately to that passing lane. But what was super interesting to me was after Brogdon switched on to Rozier and caught that passing lane, Eric Bledsoe was on Al Horford. I would expect Al Horford to crash the boards really hard there, but he didn't even go into the paint, which is so unusual for him. And I'd love to be able to ask him, did you just think there wasn't enough time, or because he was in Atlanta, he would win so many games with like a tip back, a put back. I mean, I remember game 6 against Washington in their 60-win season when they were struggling to get out of the second round. He put the game winner on a putback, and he just he literally ran by like 8 players on his way to the rim. And while I was watching, he was like, "Oh, I'm going to go get it." But again, it was strange to see him. But
it was 5.1 seconds, right? That's how much time I think was left on the last play.
And Tatum did make an attempt to rebound the basketball, but Giannis tipped it over to Brogdon. So Tatum hit the ball before the clock hit 0. But I was really surprised Horford didn't crash.
This is just purely a guess. But yeah, I noticed that too. Maybe in Horford's head, so they drew up. They went for the 2-point conversion by going for the 3. They drew that up. Maybe in Horford's head, he's thinking, we need a 3. We need a 3. Maybe that's just what he's thinking, because that happens all the time at other end of game situations when you actually need a 3. Nobody crashes the old boards because what's a buzzer beater, buzzer beater 2-pointer in that situation? I don't know. That would be my guess because I'm with you. Al Horford is that's very Al Horford like to not give effort, but maybe he just thought I don't need
really weird. And then Tatum worked really hard to get the ball and got there. Very unfortunate for him. It ended up being Giannis. He was competing with the rebound, and Giannis was smart and just tipped it out instead of because honestly, if Giannis had tried to secure that rebound, he might have fouled Tatum. And it was really smart that he just did a little tip it out and not risks that foul. So it's strange to see Giannis making the super smart play and Horford doing a very un-Horford-like thing. But I don't want to. I was mentioning earlier that with Kyrie out, with Hayward being out since the first quarter of the first game, Milwaukee should be the better team, maybe, but I don't know quite yet how to evaluate Brown and Tatum. Brown and Tatum are both very good, and Brown has really stepped up his game in the postseason as a scorer, and it's really encouraging for him as a prospect. When you see a first or second year player elevate their game in the postseason, that to me hints at something very special, because the greatest players in NBA history were oftentimes guys that knew how to get to another level in the postseason. He's still very young, very raw. He had no idea what he was doing in college. But it's like
he didn't play in the playoffs last year either. He was all but out of their rotation.
Yeah, he I want to say he played one meaningful rotation. Yeah, maybe. Maybe I'm misremembering, but he was mostly out of the
series. Yeah, he played a little bit and then was completely out for their second round series, which they lost to.
Oh no, they won the second round. They beat the Wizards in the second round.
Okay, so then I'm thinking of the third. He didn't play like he was completely removed from
Cleveland
the rotation.
Was the third round.
Yeah, okay, against Cleveland he was out.
Yeah, where Stevens really shortened the rotation. Yeah. But there was a time last year in his rookie year where when they were playing Atlanta, and I'm probably mostly recalling this because I watch Atlanta. That's the team I root for. I try to leave all fandom outside of this podcast. I hope and think I do a pretty good job at doing that. But there was a game where the rookie season, Jaylen Brown's playing off the bench. Jaylen Brown goes into the game, and DeAndre Bembry, a rookie for the Hawks, that was not typically playing, but he was clearly prepped to defend Jaylen Brown as like the only thing he prepped to do. And he went out and played like 8 possessions, and Brown didn't score. It was like 0 for 4 from the floor. And Bembry Jaylen Brown didn't play in the second half, and DeAndre Bembry didn't play in the second half. So that was like what was going on his rookie season. But to see him the season he's had this year, and certainly a part of that has been the opportunities that opened up when Hayward went down with that very unfortunate injury. But the way he's put it together, now I have to be honest, because I've gone on record to say I don't trust shooters that go through long stretches where they struggle at the free throw line, and he's one of those guys. So we'll see. But I also have to be honest and say that one of my philosophies in evaluation is young players that can take it up to another level in the postseason, to me, look like a guy that might be a guy heading towards being a really special player. Not saying for sure, but it's certainly something that catches my eye as, is this an indication that, say, 3 years from now, he's going to be a, quote, special player?
Well, this has been my thing with Jaylen Brown always is I've kind of fallen in I think he's going to be a good player, but not a really special player, because I don't know what he looks like as a really special player. Like I can't draw a line to line comparison between him and someone else who's a star in the league now or currently. And maybe that's just me being short-sighted and trying to use comparisons. But I see a player who can very much fill a role and be a very impactful defender. And then I just don't see offensive dominance in his game. Obviously, he flashes of it and overall good. But for me, what that means, and it's too young to be sure of anything. I think what Jaylen Brown's quote unquote ceiling, that isn't actually a ceiling, is to be one of those players that has no weaknesses, which make kind of like Al Horford,
Sure.
Where it's like Al Horford's a star, but
he's not great at anything.
But he's not really,
probably passing and team defense,
sure.
but there's not like one area of his game where he's going to like kill you.
Yeah.
He's going to like pick at you across the whole game and beat you. Mm-hmm. But but like in the game 4, like there was this one play where Giannis just dunked all over him.
Right.
That's going to happen from now and then because he's, a little undersized to be a rim protector, but still pretty dang good at it. But no, for me, Jaylen Brown, it's if he can become that shooter, and the free throw issues means I have questions about whether he can become like a dead bang shooter. But when we watch Jason Tatum play, Jason Tatum clearly looks like a guy that could lead the league in scoring one day, right? Because he's so long, he scores at the rim, he scores in the mid range, he scores on the 3-point line, he scores in transition. He's impossible to wrangle. He's so long and slippery and crafty. But with Brown, it's going to be, I think he's going to have to be a really physical offensive player to get there. Because I don't think the fluidity, like Tatum's elite fluidity. With Brown, I think it's more of his body. And he's just going to be like too strong for most wings to be able to kind of keep him from where he's trying to get.
I have an interesting parallel to this, and these are, I think, both inferior players, but relevant, of course, in my eyes as a Timberwolves reporter, is Andrew Wiggins and Zach LaVine. It was always the assumption that Andrew Wiggins was going to be the better player because he has that elite physicality, the body that looks like a star. But Zach LaVine entered the league, even amongst his very messy, turnover-ridden rookie season, as a fluid basketball player, a fluid athlete. And there was an argument to be made early on, once we 40, 60, 80 games into that rookie year, they were like, well, Andrew Wiggins isn't necessarily converting on this physicality. And Zach LaVine, this fluidity, there seems to be something to it. And now it's playing out in a way. Zach LaVine tore his ACL, but at some point, unless you combined elite physicality with fluidity, there's somewhat of a ceiling on that. And maybe that's what I see in Brown, whereas Tatum, I see a fluidity that will allow him to be more than the sum of his strengths.
Yeah, so my optimism for him has gone up, but I'm not saying it's a slam dunk case at all. I'm just saying he's kind of opened my eyes this postseason to being open to considering him to have a higher ceiling than I was. Because I think everyone has a general feeling like he could be the second or third best player on a really good team, but probably not ever be the best player on a really, really good team.
And you're saying you think that there's a possibility that he. I don't know
how high the ceiling is. As I think I had this ceiling right where everyone else did, and I'm saying what I'm seeing this series is making me at least be open minded to the fact that his ceiling might be a little higher than I thought it was. But it's just an openness. It's not a prediction. I'm going to continue watching, but he might have a higher ceiling than, in my opinion, than I had considered in the past. But if I had an opportunity to take him or Tatum, I'd take Tatum 10 times out of 10.
Yeah. Well, we agree on that. I haven't got there with Brown yet, though you've watched the series closer than I have because
he's from the Metro Atlanta area, so I have a little bit of intel. A little intel on the person that he is, and he's an awesome kid, and I just think sometimes that's a part of it too.
Did you read Jackie McMullen's story on him this week?
I did not.
Every Jackie
everything Jackie Mack writes. It's just
it was like a couple days ago. I'm not doing as much
reading right now, except for everything.
Everything on 15 hours of basketball.
Exactly. I have 11 basketball games on my DVR I haven't watched yet. So, but Jackie Mack is, in my opinion, the best writer in the industry.
Yeah, check it out.
Yeah, definitely will check that out. Okay, we're going to talk about Indiana and Cleveland, even though Game 4 is tonight, because there's so much good stuff to even take from games 1 through 3. Take a quick break, and we'll talk about Indiana and Cleveland.
What's good, y'all? This is your boy Justin, aka Just Blaze, host of Above the Rim. And if you want a raw take on the NBA, Above the Rim is a show for you. With dope beats and entertaining guests each week, we offer a great new insight on all things NBA. You don't want to miss it. Find it on iTunes, Stitcher Radio, and the Almighty Baller Network.
Okay, back to talk Indiana and Cleveland. Maybe, the Portland-New Orleans series has to be the most surprising to just general observers. You and me and Chris all seem to think that Portland really wasn't set up for a ton of success, but I don't think anyone expected a 4-game sweep there. But also... not that I've been talking him up all year long, but I think everybody's starting to appreciate how good Drew Holiday is as a basketball player. But that's a series we're not going to get into. This
real quick though, your brother turned me on to the Pelicans of having a shot when we were talking on the past podcast.
Yeah, he predicted that New Orleans would win more games than Oklahoma City would this year. And before the season, everybody's questioning whether New Orleans is even a playoff team in a stacked West.
I was doing that. They've figured out a way in which to make it work with 7 or 8 guys in a rotation. It works. And that was always my question with them. And I watched too much early on in the year. I'm like, ooh, Boogie and Davis, I want to watch all these games. And I burnt myself into like, what the hell is going on with the rest of the guys on their roster? They're not, no one has positions, whatever. I thought of Drew Holiday as a point guard. He clearly can play as off ball and can defend off ball. I mean, I'm very impressed with this New Orleans team.
Yeah, for sure. Greg was super high on the Pelicans for the season, and everybody asks the question: are they better without Boogie? I don't know if any team's better without an elite talent, but they play faster without Boogie, and they're more consistent on defense without Boogie. Because Boogie, his defense comes and goes, and I think it's just because his body it's hard to lug that body around up and down the court for 75 possessions or whatever he individually plays per game, and a little bit like where LeBron is now. Have to have a little bit of a selective kind of, okay, I'm really going to show up on this defensive possession or not. But with Boogie out, and I root for Boogie like all the time. I know he's not had the best kind of track record off the court, but I generally am an optimist and root for people to be able to kind of figure it out, put it together, and those sorts of things. But anyway, Cleveland and India, Pacers fans are like, you're already trying not to talk about the series. No, I love the series. I can't wait to watch Game 4 tonight. My observations here: the Cavs are just having a hard time generating offense, and has been the case all season long. They struggle to protect the rim when they play Love at the 5, and I try to say every time that's not Kevin Love's fault. He's not the one assigning the center position to himself. He really helps him as a rebounder, but as a complete zero as a rim protector. This is the most obvious observation, but it's hard to get the other analysis about talking about the fact Cavs came out in Game 2, trapping Oladipo, forcing the ball to other players, not letting Oladipo walk into his perimeter shot like he likes to do. That's how he typically gets his rhythm, is kind of walking into a shot, not giving him a path to the rim. And I never really saw anything like tactical from Nate McMillan to either punish the trap or help Oladipo get good shots through some other actions than he is across the season. Oladipo has been 3 for 18 from the 3-point line in games 2 and 3. After scoring 32 in Game 1, Oladipo's at 22 and 18 in Games 2 and 3. It's going to be interesting to see if the Pacers come out with any type of adjustment tonight to kind of counter the trapping. You'd think they'd have to. In Game 3, they were able to get really good looks for Bogdanović at least. And what a game he had. He was defending LeBron for most of his 36 minutes he played. And offense, 30 points on just 16 shooting possessions, 7 for 9 from the 3-point line. That's probably the best shooting performance he's going to put up in a series. But he's an elite shooter. He's a guy who can knock down open shots. And then the Pacers finally in Game 3 did kind of use that trap to find open shots for Bogdanović on the weak side, swinging it across. So the Cavs held Oladipo to 5 of 15 shooting, and they lost. So they held Oladipo to 5 of 15, they lost. So I had to go back and look. How many times did Victor Oladipo have 5 made field goals or fewer? Mm-hmm. And how did the Pacers do in those games? So 9 times in the regular season, Oladipo had 5 field goals made or fewer. What do you think their record was in those games?
Well, now the way you're framing it, I'm feeling like maybe they did all right.
6-3.
Oh.
So what that told me was they're still confident in themselves. They're still comfortable in themselves when they have to go to other players for offensive production. Yeah. Now I didn't watch quite as much Pacers as you like, because Greg and I, we watch everybody. Mm-hmm. And I think I'm feeling like I wish I would have seen a little bit more, because when I went back and saw that surprised me. And I felt like if I had watched a proper amount of the Pacers, that it wouldn't surprise me. But there's 30 teams. It's hard to watch everybody. Sure. And it's hard to know. I mean, even though Greg and I were very high on I don't know, very high, but we were higher than everybody else in the Pacers coming into the season, even though I still don't think much of Nate McMillan as a coach. But the Cavs are just, apart from when LeBron can put up 40 to 45 points, they're not able to even get to 100 points in a game. And they still have issues on defense. So I never want to, I would never bet a penny of any money that was important to me against LeBron ever, ever, ever. But the formula that we see in the first 3 games doesn't make, if LeBron James wasn't on that team, I think we'd be calling this series almost over, because they can't generate 100 points of offense. unless their lead guy gets to 40. And the Pacers are getting it done. And it's, I think everyone's also learning that the Pacers defend with Oladipo not on LeBron or not on the other team's primary wing attacker or primary creator. And, you know, I remember like with Washington last year, Bogdanovich, Brooks ultimately wouldn't play him defensively. But I think it was people always try to play him up to like the 4 and kind of quote hide him. But he's showing that, you know, he has to work really hard, but he's providing some resistance to LeBron. So I'll stop talking and let you react to any.
No, you're saying this in a different way than me, but I left watching that game 3, and the word I would describe Indiana's play as is just unafraid, not intimidated, a full belief in themselves. And I think that really was physically manifested, not necessarily in Oladipo in this game, who didn't play well. It was Bogdanovich. And obviously we can point to his 11 for 15 from the field, and he made 7 of 9 threes. That's great. I didn't even realize that. But on defense, unafraid to sit down and do everything he can in his possibility to stay in front of LeBron as much as he can. And even when he's beat, work as hard as he can to bring LeBron to the secondary defender. LeBron doesn't have any option when he's going to the basket but to go up and over Domantas Sabonis or up and over Miles Turner. And also having Thad Young off the ball, I think did a good job of chipping in on those situations as well. You
can tell that Bogdanovich, when he's losing leverage as a defender, he's trying to push him towards that.
Yeah. And
then also when they get back and can't match on those possessions on defense where you have to kind of match up and they can't match up perfectly, if Bogdanovich can't get to LeBron, Thad is jumping on LeBron very intentionally.
Sure.
And it's interesting that using Turner on typically like a guard, as someone who's not going to threat to really attack with the dribble. So it might be Korver, you know, a threat to shoot, but you know, they're not putting him on.
They don't have a traditional rim defender. They don't have somebody who's like lurking about that they're trying to keep by the bucket. Their rim defense is as elite help
as a team.
Yeah.
And but you can definitely tell Bogdanovich is trying to funnel LeBron towards Thad when he's not able to contain him by himself. But you know, the defensive coach, I mean, it's interesting because I don't really, you're looking for something sophisticated on offense to punish the trap, and you're not really seeing Nate McMillan really do much. He's had some good ATOs like end of games and things like that, but the defensive execution, teams don't execute defensively at this level unless they're coached well.
Yeah.
And we were talking earlier about how Simmons, the Sixers roster, is kind of taking on the identity of Simmons. Well, the fearlessness and the Pacers, I think, has a lot to do with Victor Oladipo and how he has come through being considered an underwhelming player for where he was drafted. Not the greatest draft class, but he's come through with his confidence intact onto a team where he can kind of be the alpha player. And I think you have to give credit to Oladipo for kind of bringing identity to that team that when no one thought they would accomplish anything this year and would even be dumb to try to even make the playoffs. And here they are up 2-1 on Cleveland, and they look like they're right now in control of the series.
You mentioned their defense, and what my opinion is with defense is you can coach defense to like a middle of the pack, maybe like middle of the league level. And then it's at some point, it just becomes upon the players to decide that we are going to put as much energy into executing that defensive game plan as we are maybe to our strides to get 20 points or to have effectiveness on offense. And actually, to the Blazers' credit, who we were whipping on earlier, they were doing that earlier on this season. They said, this is our focus. This is where we are putting our energy in. And focusing there, and they found success. And I think I just looked it up now. They only had the 13th defensive rating in the league, but I wonder where they would be at if they didn't play with this connectiveness and this energy defensively that says, I'm not going to let you, I'm playing unafraid. I'm not going to let you beat me, because that team just takes the ball away from you. That team just has a responsibility, views defensive rebounding as a responsibility, not as okay, it's time to play offense. And I think a lot of that is coaching, but those personalities, and I'm not around them, but I'm
like a Thad Young. Yeah.
Like a Thad Young. Bogdanovich, I think, has that too.
Yes.
And Oladipo is the head of it.
And Sabonis is a way more physical player. I thought when he was in OKC that he was a guy that preferred a more finesse style, but that's all. And now I'm learning this season that that's only because Steven Adams was taking care of all of the primary banging. But that dude is big and he is really physical. And so I came into the season thinking, there's way too much hype around Miles Turner. He's not a strong rebounder for his position. He is more of a finesse player than his body's not even going to hold up to banging all season long. And I thought, well, they're still lacking the right guy to help him. So I think of the way that Nene helps Clint Capella. I have to avoid doing a lot of work when they're going up against a really big opposing center. Right now, Capella can smoke a guy sometimes and get that guy off the court. But sometimes like a Dwight Howard type of guy might be just dominating like on the offensive glass and what have you. And that's when they'll go to Nene and let him play longer minutes. I thought that's what they need to do. But I've learned
so you're saying that's Sabonis in this Indiana
Sabonis situation has become that. And that's one of the reasons they won as many games as they did was because they do the roster construction 1 through 7 on this team is good. And then I had been saying all season long that it's going to be critical for them to get Glenn Robinson third back because he profiles as a defensive wing that can really move the needle. Now watching Bogdanovich do what he's doing is like, okay, so Sabonis is the guy that I said that they needed, and now Bogdanovich is doing what I would have expected Glenn Robinson III to do in the postseason if they were having this type of success. So it's very pleasant surprises, but you have to acknowledge that, man, it's incredible the level they're playing at right now.
And one other point, and why I thought you were going with the Nene Clint Capella thing was this the veteran mentor, which I'm sure there's some of that too in Houston. Al Jefferson is that in Indiana, who isn't getting any minutes. Yep. And I've heard lots of that he is not the disgruntled vet at the end of the bench. I mean, he's someone who's played in many playoff series and has been on Miles Turner's case this whole year for being that soft finesse player. I mean, called him soft and not in like a big brother kind of way, not in a pejorative sort of sense. But I think that team somehow with great turnover has gelled into a group. Nate McMillan deserves credit for that, but so to just all those individuals.
Yeah. And where I feel like I'm not as impressed with Nate McMillan, it's just that they're not doing a lot of sophisticated things on offense. And so I see it seems like there should be opportunity to do more. But hey, game 3, they swung the ball to the weak side for open shots. So maybe I need to give him more credit. Maybe I'm too married to the coach that he was before he is now. And coaches are allowed to grow and change just like players are. So maybe the way that I'm becoming more open-minded to Jaylen Brown's ceiling being higher, maybe I need to just kind of scrap my historical perspective of Nate McMillan and just completely reevaluate him. But hey, this team is where it is. And so he certainly is the person that's accountable for results, and the results are good. So good for them. So for me, I'm just looking for LeBron's probably going to come out and put up 40 points tonight if they're going to put up enough points to win. Unless Korver just has a Korver game or something like that that's not generally repeatable every single game. But I just think LeBron looks like he knows he doesn't have enough help. Jordan Clarkson's not good enough to really help him. Rodney Hood's not really good enough to help him.
I don't get how Rodney Hood hasn't fit better. I love Rodney Hood. I have a bias, loved him out of the draft and loved him. They have not effectively utilized him at all post-trade.
And the Jazz were done with him.
Yeah. So maybe I'm wrong.
I loved Hood in the draft too, and I loved Hood. Even I was frustrated that he was playing off the bench in his first couple of seasons. And I even thought he should have been a higher priority than they made like Dante Exum at times. And certainly, if not for injuries to other guys in the wing, he still might even been like not in the rotation. I just think he can't physically handle I think his body for whatever reason, just cannot handle 82 games of 30 minutes a game. He'll go consistently when he's playing 32 minutes a game. He'll go 15 to 20 games and something will get hurt. And I think if he can just settle into being a 20 minute a game guy, even at this age, that he's going to be able to make more of an impact. I just think his body doesn't hold up. I think it just comes down. I love his. Yeah. Anytime I hear him talk, he seems like a very team minded guy.
I've heard very
strong culture. Yeah. And so that's what impressed me as much when he was young, was just even the way he talked about the game, being so young, and his reputation as a worker. And so I don't think it's any fault of his. Mm-hmm. Your DNA is your DNA, and some guys are just more prone to injuries through certain types of workload and stuff. So I just think he's physically not able to hold up. But I also think that there's probably some mental gravity that comes along with kind of, maybe he knows his body can't do it, and is maybe not accepting that, or having trouble accepting that, or what have you. But I've said all season long, he's not going to be a guy that's going to replace Gordon Hayward. Not even close, because he can't physically handle the workload. So
restricted free agent this summer. That'll be an interesting.
Yeah,
pretty much all the restricted free agencies.
Yeah, so. And a guy like Jabari Parker. So kind of a similar situation. He's a restricted free agent, but no one really kind of knows a lot of injuries. A lot of where Hood has been not like one big injury, where Parker's been two massive injuries that really concern you. But where I think typically a player like him would chase opportunity to play and be a priority on an offensive team. But I think it'd be better for him to try to get on a good team where he's a role player off the bench and doesn't have to play 30 minutes a game. But that's not going to get him paid. So I'm sure his agent's going to try to trick one team into really gambling.
Yeah. Because he is kind of in that situation right now in Cleveland, where it's a good team, but I still, a LeBron team it's a different apples to oranges kind of.
But I would imagine that he's still struggling with, I'm not starting, I'm not playing a ton of minutes, I'm not a priority. When you're on LeBron's team, the good and the bad is that you may or may not be a priority, but you're going to get open shots. Mm-hmm. But that's probably enough on Rodney Hood. I don't want to call his career or anything like that. But this game feels like unless the Pacers are in control right now of the series, and the only path I see to that swinging back is LeBron just getting to a whole nother level, like he has done in the past, and just kind of ripping the series back away from the Pacers. But he looks like when I see him, his body language, even for brief seconds, he looks like a guy who just knows he doesn't have enough help.
He doesn't. I think that's what it comes down to. And yeah, you're right. He would know better than we would. I'm sure he'll try and rip as much as he can out of there. But I had some doubt entering the series, and I watching these 3 games, and I know we said we don't want to be doing predictions, but I'm taking Indiana.
Yeah, and this is why I predicted that Toronto wouldn't end up facing. That was before we had the seed, so I didn't know how it would line up.
Well, that's looking smart now.
Yeah. Okay, let's take 5 minutes and wrap up and talk about the Wolves. So we talked about Milwaukee switching everything. Houston's been doing that since long before the postseason got here. And it took a few games for the Timberwolves to kind of figure out how to create shots against that defensive scheme. But just observations.
Oh my God, it's been a soap opera. Particularly it's a soap opera because by this switching scheme worked excellent in games 1 and 2, because it almost begs the Wolves to give the ball to Towns in the post, because it's literally like Eric Gordon is all of a sudden the individual matchup on Towns. But the Rockets are bringing this baseline help from the weak side, so that as soon as Towns has the ball, a double is going to be there. And it doesn't matter if it's Eric Gordon, because even if it's Joe Johnson or Trevor Ariza, who aren't necessarily big, Towns can't just at 15 feet just barrel through a double team. But what's happening is it's taking him out of the game, and Towns is a very mental type of player, and he had 3 buckets on 9 attempts in the first game and 2 buckets on 9 attempts in the second game. I mean, it is awful. He was completely removed because the Wolves wanted to find ways for him to score, and they have to work through them. The proper way to take advantage of this is to get the ball to Towns, have the double come over, swing, wide open three. The issue is that the Wolves play at such a slow pace that by the time Towns has the ball, there's 6-7 seconds left on the shot clock. They don't push the ball up the floor and get the ball to Towns so that he can kick it out to somebody else. And the Wolves don't have shooters out to surrounding him on the perimeter. So it was a complete nightmare. Thibodeau, I was in Houston covering the series and talking to him at practice, and he's like, we just need to trust the pass. And Jeff Teague comes out and starts publicly saying to the media there that he wants to do the exact opposite thing that Thibodeau does. Thibodeau was like, well, if they got a switch and Jeff has Capella on him, we want Jeff going to the basket. And then we asked Jeff, hey, is that kind of a dream situation for you to have Capella switched on you so you can isolate? He goes, no, that's playing right into Houston's hands. So literally what the head coach is saying and the quarterback of the offense are saying are completely inverse things. So game two happens and they get destroyed. The game was over in, I would say, 15 minutes. The first quarter, the Wolves were winning. Rockets went on a run. No, not even a heartbeat for the Wolves for the rest of the game. So I come into game three. It's even more of a soap opera because now we have 2 games of Towns. What's going on? Charles Barkley is ripping on him on TV, calling him the dumbest team in the world. Reporters are asking him that, saying, so Charles Barkley just called you guys the dumbest team in the world. Like, what do you think about that? Again, Towns, very soft type of personality, mental. He's not handling it well. Pretends he is, but it's pretty clear. He
described himself as being Amish-like in terms of not having any connectedness to that noise.
Which is not true.
Possible, probably in this era.
Exactly. For that reason, and I'm very certain that he's seeing and hearing it, and maybe he's ignoring it. I don't know. I don't know to what degree it's affecting him, but I know he's a 22-year-old kid who's his first time in the NBA. He's supposed to be a Hall of Famer, and he's getting completely shut down, at least in the box score. And it was just, I entered game 3 with very little hope because that's not even one of the best elements of the Rockets is their defense. Their defense has been good, but this simple little double from the baseline, switching everything into a double, it has completely removed the Wolves from the game. And we haven't even started talking about James Harden, Chris Paul, or the cavalcade of shooters that they have, Clint Capella. I just thought it was over. And then all of a sudden, game 3, double switches start coming. The Wolves play with a little more pace. So there's more time on the shot clock. They get the ball to Towns. And to Towns' credit, peppered the perimeter for kicked it out for threes. The Wolves shot 15 of 27 from 3, which is just kind of objectively ridiculously good. And the Wolves kind of end to end dominated game 3. I know you watched the game, but the crowd got into it, and now I don't know. Now I'm in a soap opera, and I don't know what to feel. My gut tells me I see so many more weapons on this Houston team, but with the Wolves, as close as I am to them, it's so hard for me to understand what is coming next for this team. There's just a vast amount of disconnect amongst the players, but also at the same time, a crazy amount of talent. They have a crazy amount of talent on this team.
And they put up a ton of points in the game. It's
a ton.
It's nuts. But it's so interesting because everybody killed the Derrick Rose signing. What do you...
I didn't even bring that up. Talk about a soap opera.
But it was interesting. I was watching it last night and I was like, they play with a better pace when Rose is in the game. His instinct, maybe because of his MVP background, is to, as soon as he gets the ball, I'm attacking. And I'm fast, I'm athletic. And he looked like vintage Rose at moments in last night's game. I don't know that anyone should bank on having that 82 games across the season, but I think he can force stretches. If he's maybe a little bit like the Rodney Hood we just talked about, maybe 15 to 20 minutes a game, he can be more 80% of what he used to be for that workload if someone could find it. But Teague is a guy that's always wants to kind of walk the ball up, get to the top of the key, get everybody in their spot, and then go. but Tyus Jones gets them into their actions more. But Teague was good in this game, but he still found himself with the ball with 5 seconds, left on the shot clock. And of course, anytime a team is trying to work through someone in the post, the opposing defense is going to try to bleed that shot clock and create pressure to be not sure where the shot's going to come from. Tick 7, 6, 5, 4, and they did hit a number of shots like right at the buzzer.
They have all year.
Yeah, but the Houston was much less effective on defense when the Wolves pushed the pace. Mm-hmm. And it should be noted that I've gone on record, my listeners will know, that the first half of the season when they were playing fast, I was like, James Harden, Chris Paul are not going to hold up playing this fast. I thought D'Antoni really was kind of stuck in that one kind of model. But when they became basically, it's like at the slowest pace team in the league, I was like, that's a great fit for these guys physically. And then when you watch last night, you're like, I don't know if this is Thibodeau's style at all, but man, if they push the pace, it might be a problem for Houston.
It might be. I just think Thibodeau is going to want to rein it back in because that is so not him. I think situationally he wants on defensive rebounds. He wants to push pace a little bit, but made basket, we're walking it up, we're grounding out possessions, and we're okay if it gets down to late in the shot clock. I think that's what his belief is. And to some extent, he has a pretty strong counter argument. They're the 4th best offense in the NBA this season. So they did that the whole year. My fear all along, and looked pretty warranted through the first 2 games, is I don't know how well that style works in the playoffs of just grinding it out, isolation type.
Well, I would also question, it's fair to question whether it works in the playoffs, but in my mind, there's zero question that's exactly what the Rockets want to do.
Right.
So you're playing right into their sweet spot by doing that. But I don't know if, so I was wondering earlier in the season, can D'Antoni innovate again? Can he innovate to a different iteration of how his system works? And he did. Mm-hmm. And I didn't know if he was even capable, because he talked about how the principles that he's used forever, even coaching in Europe and innovating in the NBA and play fast and with pace and But then I think I'm guessing like either Daryl Morey or whatever, or maybe their analytics were like, the numbers tell us we do better when we're playing slower than we are faster, because they certainly committed to it. And I think that, like I've said over and over, that's a way better fit physically for Harden and Paul. And maybe the thing here that's most important to the big picture, I know you cover the Timberwolves, so you're kind of at the atomic level with the team. I think it is critically important that they had some success in this series, even if it's the only game they won. So they can go, yep, we put it together, we did it, we beat the team that had the best record in the league. Game 1, we competed, So I hope that for the Timberwolves, because I in my root for everything kind of person that I am, they're so talented that I want them to be on a trajectory to where they can be another really great team in the league. Because I think the league's better when you have more teams on that trajectory, and it's exciting to see. Like I was talking about the Boston Philly thing earlier, it's exciting to have 3 or 4 teams kind of at least on that trajectory. So I'm hoping for that for them. I also think, and I've been on the record in the postseason, like I said, time and time again, the Rockets need to get out of the first and second round, presuming they will. 10 or 11 games, no more than that, because of I just have a strong belief they're going to run out of gas if it takes more games than otherwise necessary. So, I mean, the Warriors, the Pelicans, whoever, anyone else in the Western Conference field should be grateful for every game the Wolves make them play that's more than 4, and clearly it's going at least 5 here.
I do. I think it probably still will be 5. But one thing with the Rockets, though, this was Ryan Anderson. Game 3 was Ryan Anderson's first game back. He'd been injured, and they also have Bob Moute, who hasn't played at all in this series, and will be back for round 2. It seems like. So yes, they seem a little shorthanded now, or they did in games 1 and 2, and I think that actually showed up in their play. They could have used a couple more options. They certainly could have used Anderson's shooting. They shot below 30% from 3 in both of games 1 and game 2. He's just such a weapon and can shoot it from so much deeper than everyone else can. So I guess my slight pushback would be, let's see once Bob Moute's back. Let's see how when Anderson's back. And also for depth, I think an X factor is how effective can Gerald Green be? I kind of believe Gerald Green can fit into his role. Joe Johnson, I'm not sure if he is helpful for that team.
Yeah, I thought because they were playing at a slow pace that he would be a fit.
Right.
I have no idea what his physical status is right now because we haven't seen him really play in forever.
He's not making even catch and shoot threes.
Well, the thing for Anderson you have to say is one positive element for Houston was that Anderson found his rhythm.
Yeah,
as the game progressed. So if he has that rhythm going into game 4, that is another stressor for the Wolves defense for sure.
And he killed the Wolves during the regular season. Those 4 matchups, he was a plus 57 in 91 minutes.
Yeah, that's crazy,
ridiculous.
Yeah. So that's some there's something pessimistic to take from the Wolves win. But like I said, I think it just takes a lot of it's mentally good for them to have some success, even if it's just a signal in game.
Absolutely. And going on my podcast and probably now retrospectively a little overreacting, was assuming it was going to be a sweep because they just got beat so bad in game 2, and I kind of assumed there'd be more. I thought it would be a sweep. They'd lose in games 3 and 4, and then you're leaving the postseason on a 4-game sweep in pretty demoralizing fashion,
and lost your draft pick.
And that's where I'm going with this. It's great to break the streak. It's good to get these guys that experience, but I don't know how valuable that experience is in a 4-game sweep. And every time I bring that up in Minnesota, it's like, I don't know. I've made a critical sin.
And it's one of those things where you're happy to be wrong.
I'm happy to be wrong. Yeah. Well, and it looks like I already might be.
And no one's right all the time. So, I think the Twitter account, Bad Takes Exposed or whatever, whatever it is hilarious.
Right.
But sorry, but if you have opinions, you weigh in, you're going to be wrong sometimes. I'll admit, one of the times we recorded, I think it was maybe the February recording, as you were leaving, you were like, the Wolves would be better to miss the playoffs than to get in the 8 seed or 7 seed, right? My answer was yes.
Yeah.
But now that they have that success in game 3, I think that makes me wrong. That makes me wrong too.
Yeah. And I just don't know. And I think every time we've talked on the pod or off the pod, this has kind of been a conversation because I find it quite fascinating. I don't know how much winning makes it worth it for the pod. I know that a sweep was not enough. I feel very confident about that. Is this one game getting a win at home at Target Center? That seemed like that was something. Is that enough to make up for an extra first-round draft pick? And I know you might be thinking, somebody listening to this, what's one first-round draft pick? The Wolves have messed up a million of those. And what I said on my podcast is those first-round picks are currency in improving your team in the future. Yeah. And I think this team needs to change.
Yeah, exactly. And you'll be able to tell. I've been listening to you guys' podcast because you talked about if you need to ship Gorgie out, a first-round draft pick, sure, it would be nice to incentive to do that. And
I mean, the Wolves are going up into they're in one of the worst cap situations going forward because you have Towns Wiggins who are signed or are going to sign these massive deals. Butler has the same size extension coming up that he'll be eligible for the following year. So at some point, like we're kind of locked into this core, and the only way to change it is through using draft assets to bring other players in because they're not going to go out and get anyone for anything more than the mid-level exception. And what's the best thing the mid-level exception could get this year? PJ Tucker, who has been great. A big piece for the Houston Rockets.
But you had to be a no-doubt contender to get that guy on the contract.
Exactly. But I even think you add PJ Tucker. I don't know if that totally... I think the Wolves need more than that. I think what they need...
they do, yeah. And we talked earlier, how nice would it be just to have a Malcolm Brogdon? A guy that can play 25 minutes a game, make all the right decisions, execute on both ends of the court, knows what he's doing, is trustworthy, knows exactly what... and even... in his personification makes the team better generally when he's on the court. And that was a first round pick.
I have my eyes set on something higher than that. And what I think 2 first round picks would have got there is I think there's a chance that a player like Kemba Walker or CJ McCollum become available this offseason. And it's going to become somewhat of a bidding war for him in assets. And what you look at in Minnesota is what are your assets? We'll move Towns and Wiggins out of it, given their contracts that are coming. You have this first round pick. Now they only have 1 first round pick. Tyus Jones, Justin Patton,
And unfortunately, Justin Patton is back on a really bad spot from a health perspective.
Yes, he's untradeable. He just had foot surgery last week. So I don't know. I don't think that given the financial element to it, that the Oklahoma City pick, which is going to be like 20th overall, and Tyus Jones is going to get you in the conversation for a CJ McCollum or a Kemba Walker, when I think that is crucially what this team needs is to go from a Jeff Teague to a Kemba Walker, or somehow finagling things to get to a CJ McCollum in onto this team. And I don't see how they can do it now, because if they want to go get Kemba Walker, they're probably going to need to move Jeff Teague. I don't think anybody's going to be open to bringing on Jeff Teague at $19 million a year for the next 2 years. And also, the Wolves kind of need to use a first round pick to move Gorgui Dieng, because he can't play, or isn't welcome to play, more than 12 minutes a night on this team. And he's going to be making $16-17 million for the next 3 years. So given the specific layout of what was going on with the Timberwolves, an extra first round pick of currency could be the difference between them getting in on the Kemba Walker, CJ McCollum, or whatever, player X. I don't think they're going to get Kawhi, but that level of player that's fringe all-star, maybe the 20 players who are not all-star players, the next 20, if one of those guys become available, that could be something that pushes the scales for the Wolves. Now, I don't know if they can get them.
I agree that's the gap to get to being a competitor. I guess the only thing that I'll say is no one considered Victor Oladipo to be that level of player. So maybe they can find a guy who is undervalued. But like I said regarding something else earlier in terms of like the Sixers, whether the process worked or not, that there's a certain amount of randomness to any outcome. Even Oladipo working out as well as he did with the Pacers. I mean, I think like to go back and think how much Thad Young has helped him this year. Mm-hmm. But you know, maybe there's a guy. I don't know who it is, but I do agree with you that if they had 2 first round draft picks, they would have the currency to compete for a guy. For example, if Charlotte feels like they have to move on from Kemba, mm-hmm. and when you look at what they have versus what other teams have to get that, they are far short in currency to do it.
Yes. And yeah, I don't know. It's just, that's my belief of what needs to happen with this team, because I just don't think, as it's currently constructed, that it's able to compete. Another element, though, is that I'm not sure Tom Thibodeau and Scott Layden, who's the GM, Tom Thibodeau is also the president of basketball operations, want to change anything for next year. My sense is that Derrick Rose will be back and that they will make tweaks on the fringes of the bench. I would be surprised if anything more than Gorgui Dieng being dumped with a first round pick or something, and maybe they get back an idea I floated is Gorgui Dieng and a first round pick for DeMarre Carroll. Get back a guy with 1 year on his contract who could probably still be a rotation player. Salaries match up. Maybe get a second pack or something from Brooklyn.
And just make you more legitimate defensively.
Yes. That's kind of what I've been looking at. But honestly, I think the Timberwolves run back a team that is very similar to this team this year, and their boost is Derrick Rose. I think that's what Tom Thibodeau's hope is.
Last night I wanted to make, before I'll say it was a terrible joke, but I was like, it's going to joke that they're going to trade Teague for Joakim Noah and then give Derrick Rose the starting point guard role. But I even think Thibodeau's, that's beyond his possibilities.
It's scary. I mean, Luol Deng is looming out there. Joakim Noah is looming out there. The thing is if Thibodeau views Gorgui Dieng as a sunk contract, that's at least, partway underwater.
Yeah, but with Luol Deng, you get out from another contract sooner than you do Gorguy's, at least
1 year.
Yeah, but
yeah,
it opens up the cap space sooner than it opens up the cap space when Karl Towns is 24 instead of 25, which could be a thing, right?
Yeah, I would just argue that Gorgui Dieng's contract is less sunk than Luol Deng and Joakim Noah.
I generally like Gorgui, but it's just that he got that. So I write for Peachtree Hoops, as you know.
Yeah.
And I got, we're doing all of our player reviews, which is difficult after a 24-win season. But I wrote the Miles Plumlee review, and I'll just say it was hard to find interesting analysis to put in there. But one thing I noted was that he got he was one of a group of centers that got more than $10 million per year contracts in the summer of 2016. A lot of centers got that, and the whole league is just kind of waiting for those contracts to expire. I think
Gorgie's is another year though, because his was an extension.
But he's younger, has more upside. He plays really hard. He's a better defender than most people I think he is. He just needs to develop some way to be a helpful offensive player, and he's not quite there yet. And at the same time, I don't know really what to think of the player development capacity of this Timberwolves organization as it's constructed.
I will say thus far, we haven't seen much of it. It's the development of the team has been by bringing in other players, and you can make a pretty strong argument that Andrew Wiggins hasn't developed much. And we won't go into it on this pod, but Andrew Wiggins has been great in this series.
But I think everyone has concluded that he's never going to have that killer mentality. Like you were talking about Zach versus Wiggins earlier. Zach is a murderer. He's an assassin compared to Wiggins.
Sure.
And I hope it works out for him in Chicago. And there are all sorts of bad parts of his game that he needs to work on. But in terms of like mindset, he is an absolute assassin. Totally. And Wiggins is just never, ever going to be that. Mm-hmm. And so, does Butler help with that? Probably. Does Butler physically, so it's someone who want to give him a supermax, and looking at his physical track record, I don't know. Yeah. We'll leave it at that and make that a teaser. As you finish this, if you've not yet listened to the next Wolves Wired podcast, listen to that.
Even more written content. I have a lot of written content at ZoneCoverage.com.
Yeah, that too. Also, become a premium subscriber. I did that 2 days ago when you guys were talking about on the pod. I was like, I'm going to support my buddy Dane. I live in Minnesota. That. So yeah, even take a read there, and they, especially if you're in Minnesota, they put out great content for all sports, and it was interesting to listen to the. Greg and I struggled to be efficient with a 2-person pod. You guys, all 4 of you on the other day. And it was good. I enjoyed it.
Yeah. No,
I'm a Timberwolves fan, and I enjoyed it. I mean, I follow all the teams, and I've had you on this year because I thought the Timberwolves were one of the most fascinating teams this year. But if you want to hear sort of how the psyche of the Minnesota Timberwolves organization and fan base and media are like, where are we? I think
we're confused. We're very confused.
Yeah, exactly. But
we're confused, but we're thinking about it.
Which makes the conversation, I think, just fascinating. Yeah. Makes it absolutely fascinating. Because where, like with other teams, it's like, okay, open and shut case. We know what they are. Like, for example, that's what I felt like I knew about the Wizards. 2 seasons now, they have not ever looked like a team that was striving for greatness, right? With Timberwolves, we don't know, but which makes the conversation great. So again, go listen to Wolves Wired. I think will enjoy that very much, and go check out Dane and his colleagues' coverage at Zone Coverage. Follow Dane at Dane Moore NBA. Follow me if you don't already at Willis_Glenn. Greg, again, being the good Samaritan right now, so not on the pod. He's at Lawton Willis. We're at Press Podcast. And is there a Zone Coverage handle you want to?
There is at Zone Coverage MN if you want. Zone Coverage, all of our content will be shot out through there. But
okay, thanks as always for listening. Appreciate it, and we'll be back hopefully midweek picking up with another update. If for some reason that doesn't work out schedule-wise, we'll be back next week.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Full Court Press Podcast. Subscribe free on iTunes, Stitcher, or the Google Play Store. Follow the Full Court Press NBA Podcast on Twitter at Press Podcast.
Hey, it's Flo. And you know what word I've never understood? Top hat. Aren't all hats on top? They're like the toppest part of every outfit, unless I've been doing it wrong. That's why I stick with simple words like Flotection. It means the sense of security you'll feel when your new home is protected by home insurance through me and Progressive. Also, there shouldn't be a top hat unless there's a bottom hat. Wait, is that what underwear is?
Save an average of 17% on car insurance when you bundle home and auto through Progressive. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company affiliates and other insurers. Discount not available in all states or situations.